Good morning, Rebbe. Can you hear me? Hello? You can't hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, thank you. We're going to go to the Sharkabonos today. And getting into an Indian that I thought was, it was a little bit hard to understand. This is really another one of those, the bouncing ball kind of deals. I'm looking for a pencil. I got 1,000 pencils. Where do I put my pencils? Here's one. Okay. They'll wind up in other rooms. Okay, so where we left off was on this number Taf Kuf Tas Zayin. Now he said something that really very difficult to understand, I think in its essence, was that he says that, innocently enough, he said that the Chabad of Asiya, the Benemius of it, goes up and it covers over the Nai of Yitzira. Okay. But then he mentioned that, then he says that, well, it turns out it skips the Malchus. You know, you forgot to mention a lot of times that you don't mention Malchus, because Malchus is on the back of Nai. But here he said, well, they skipped the Malchus, and the Malchus actually, because it's related to Asiya, because it's actually the Asiya part of Yitzira, so therefore they could count it like a Asiya, and it still remains an Asiya. Now, that's not so easy for me to understand, because, I mean, if you're part of Yitzira, you're part of Yitzira, then he gave an explanation, but it's just a little bit difficult for me to swallow. So now it's going to get more complicated, and this becomes one of these follow the bouncing ball kind of deals. Let me see if I can get myself lined up there better. So he says like this, starting on number Shin Lamadalad, he says, and the subject here is Chachanas Amalchus B'Asiya. So in order to make a place in Asiya, Na'asara Yedecha Tefilas Ana Bakoazh. So when we get to this phrase Ana Bakoazh, which takes explanation also, that's gonna make room for what's for the kedusha that's coming out of Bia into Atzilus. So let's see how this goes. He said, "Lahavin heich be'eze ofek machinim makum b'chasiya." How do you make a place in the Asiya for the? There's no place for it. Shabot tikanis a kedusha from the stalekas b'chaklipos for the kedusha that comes out of the klipos. So shanaske levoyer merosha Asiya. So let's start explaining the beginning of Asiya. Yesh lahaske levoyer as seder aliyasav erosh olam Asiya. So let's start looking over there at the top. Hinein is boyer lael kamalsa the yitzir in the she'eres lamata b'Asiya. It remains down below in Asiya. So that right there, I think, is just what we'd be doing in Asiya. We understand it got skipped over, and then as a result of that, then it gets pushed down into Asiya, or it's because it's like the Malchus of the upper is the Kesser of the lower. I'm just trying to think how to get down there, but it's there. So, B'Aliyas ha'olamos, as we're talking about the olamos on the asis be'es and biris ish reach the koach l'Hashem. So we said that, and he's going to explain. Asa malchus the yitzir and the she'eres the mata b'olam Asiya, and that leaves you in a position where you skipped it, and you skipped the malchus, and it winds up in olam Asiya. So so now that malchus that remains of it gets divided into two different aspects. Behinda pinimius and hitzonius. Okay, so everything has a pinimius in the hitzonius. But malchus the yitzir and the she'eres b'olam Asiya. Nachlakes, it becomes divided up, lishtei bechinos, which are panemius and kitzonius. I'm trying to follow the bouncing ball and see what happens to this kitzonius and this panemius. And let's go on. He said, V'hiner anu ma'alim es kitzonius shalosh rishonos d'Asiya. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the first three, the kitzonius, the gar of the hitzonius, which we understand that it's still down below in Asiya, Kenizkar. So I didn't see what the energy is that pushes the Kitzonius, but originally it's the Panemius of that goes up, not the Kitzonius. Now he's going to say what's going to happen is the Kitzonius is going to go up, Okay, let's read it again. It says, Ato ano ma'alam es kitzonius hachabad shal olam asiyah. We're bringing that up. Ashecha be'ez amiras ish avreach nekoyach l'Hashem. That when you said ish, the part about which of ish avreach nekoyach, that pushed up the panemius on top of the kitzonius of the nai of Yitzira. Okay, we got a little introduction, and this is something that requires really some work on it. We'll wait for Rebbe to come back here, and Hashem should help us to get and be able to understand what's going on over here. Here we go. All right, and coming back again. When you said that phrase, that pushed up the. Let's see what he says. We still have, when that phrase is said, the Malchus, which he's telling us parenthetically, is in Olam Yitzir. He says the Malchus of Yitzira is in Asiyah, because it's Asiyah. It's the Asiyah of Yitzira, and therefore there's a match, or some kind of a match there, and therefore it's really tied to Asiyah. So he says, when you say that, and the Panemius of the Chabad moves up over to the Kitzonius of the Nai of Yitzira, Malchus remains behind. Nishares ba'olam Hasiyah. Then it says like this: "V'bechem anu malvishim as panemius malchus liyitzira asher yardach ba'olam asiyah." So he said, "V'chitzonis hachaba da'olam asiyah, shenishara ba'olam asiyah," which is still in olam asiyah. He malveshes at panemius malchus liyitzira. It covers over the panemius of the malchus of the malchus liyitzira. Remember, we have a malchus and a chitzonius of the malchus liyitzira. So he says it covers over the panemius of the malchus liyitzira. Asher b'yarda ba'olam asiyah, that had gone down into olam asiyah. Ba'ofen shechitzonius hachabad, in this way, like this. This is a lot of language going back and forth, so let's try to straighten it out. Both in Kitzonius a Chabad the Olam Asiyah. So now when you have this, the Chabad, the Kitzonius, the Chabad of the Olam Asiyah. Now Asis Ata Kitzonius the Panemius Malchus the Yitzira. So now we said, let's get it straight. He said the Kitzonius of the Chabad the Olam Asiyah. So the Kitzonius, which never moved up, is still in Asiyah. He says Naasa Ata Kitzonius the Panemius the Malchus the Yitzira. Remember that Malchus the Yitzira is divided into two parts, a Kitzonius and a Panemius. So now he says that what happens is that the Nasis Ata Kitzonius the Panemius Malchus Yitzira. So what was left over really becomes a Kitzonius of the Malchus the Yitzira, which is Sheyarda the Olam Asiyah, which is in Olam Asiyah. The Kitzonius Chabad the Asiyah. Now the Kitzonius of the Chabad the Asiyah Adayin Omedet Ba'olam Asiyah. It's still there. So the only the Panemius went up. The Kitzonius did not. And then you see that the Nishara Gam Kitzonius Shal Malchus the Yitzira Ba'olam Asiyah, so the Kitzonius of the Malchus of Yitzira is still down there in Asiyah also. For Hazard the Panemius, but now it's going to become a Panemius. V'zer v'chitzonius Shal Malchus the Yitzira. Now it's going to become a Panemius because it has something covering it. Now, what happened to the Panemius of the Malchus the Yitzira? I didn't hear that. So we're just talking about the Kitzonius of it. V'az olin Panemius shalo emseiyus the Siyah. So then, the next thing that happens is I read it slightly wrong. V'az olin Panemius shlosh emseiyus the Siyah. So now the Chagat of the Siyah is going to move up. So now you have the Chabad the Olam Asiyah, the Hilvish as Panemius Shal Malchus the Olam Yitzira, and now it's covering over. So you have now the Chabad of the Kitzonius is covering the Panemius of Olam Yitzira, which is down below. Ola Panemius HaChagat, and then the Panemius of the Chagat, which is the part that goes up. The Olam Asiyah, it goes up. Malvishem Chitzonius HaMalchus the Yitzira, and covers over the Kitzonius of the Malchus the Yitzira as well. So this is to be straightened out. The language is a little bit off. The Panemius of Hagat the Yitzira, so now you have the Panemius of the Hagat the Yitzira, because now it moved up. Olo Malvish as Kitzonius HaMalchus the Olam Yitzira, it goes up and it covers over the Malchus the Olam Yitzira. Now you have two coverings on it now, because you had the Kitzonius of the Chabad the Olam Yitzira, and now you have the Panemius of the Hagat, the Olam Yitzira is on top. So you can straighten it out a little bit. he says, "V'na'asis kitzonius alahon," it becomes a kitzonius for it or to it. Ba'ofen shepenimis ahaga de'olam asiyas and ha'asiyah na'asim kitzonius. It comes and becomes a kitzonius on the kitzonius of malchus the yitzira. So it's a kitzonius. It's on the outside of the malchus of the tzion. And it makes those elements that are in front of it, in other words, they came before it to cover. It makes them into penimius. The kitzonius of malchus the yitzira. So let's go over this closely. The kitzonius of the malchus the yitzira. Bechinas penimius. It now it changes, it reforms itself. It was a kitzonius, now it's going to be a penimius. The penimius are chagat the olam asiyah. So it now becomes a penimius to that chagat. To the penimius of the Hagat that went up. So since we see that we have these two particular bechinos, shehim hitzonis shlosh rishonos, the penimius shlosh emseiyus. So to say it again, that these are the hitzonius of the Chabad, and also the penimius of the shlosh of the Hagat. Behin Hitzoni is the Chabad the Asiya, Malvish the Penimius of Malchus the Yitzir, which is covering over, once again, the Chabad the Asiya, the Hitzonius of it, is covering over the Penimius of the Malchus the Yitzira. Behin Penimius the Hagat, and then also the Penimius of the Hagat the Asiya, Malvish the Hitzonius of Malchus. So you have like three layers there. Now exactly what to do with this, not sure. Okay, we'll keep struggling with this. Hashem, try to get through it. Rebbe's taking a little bit break, and so we'll be back in a minute, and give me the strength to stay through. We'll stay with us. Okay, so it says, so now he says, Malvish the Kitzonius. So now we have three layers. We have on the outside layer is the Penimius of the Hagat, the Asiyah. Inside of that is going to be this way, I think he's going to say this. The inside of that is going to be the Kitzonius of the Chabad Disi, which is covering over the Penimius of the Malchus the Yitzira. Okay, so it's a it's a lineup of three. Call Elohim Asiyah. Shteha Bechinus Alado Kitzonius HaChabad, the Penimius HaChagat, those three, Heim Ba'olam Asiyah. Now they're all in Olam Asiyah. The Heim Na'asim Kitzonius, the Kitzonius, the Penimius, the Malchus the Yitzira, and they become what? Kitzonius to the Hitzonius, and the Penimius of the Malchus the Yitzira. Let's see if the Tiv can straighten this language out. For Hitzonius HaChabad Asiyah. So now, Naase Kitzonius, the Penimius Malchus the Yitzira. So it's covering over there. Penimius HaChagat. Now the Penimius HaChagat Asiyah. So he's straightening out the language a little bit here. He says Naase Kitzonius, the Hitzonius Malchus the Yitzira. So now you have the Hitzonius, you have the Penimius, going from the outside in, you have the Penimius of the Chagat the Yitzira covering over the Kitzonius of the Chabad the Yitzira, which is covering over the Penimius. Maybe it's covering over the Kitzonius of the Malchus the Yitzira, and it makes that Malchus the Yitzira into Penimius. That's what I think he means. And as a result of this lineup of everything's covering over Yitzira, so therefore them, so he says, might as well say it. I mean, it's a little bit, to me, the story's a little crazy kind of story here, because there's so many moving parts. In order to be able to make space. This is all to be able to make space for the kedusha of Bia to be able to pull it out and have a place for it. So now, what have you done? You've evacuated the Penimius of the Hagat the Yitzira, the Asiyah rather, Hagat of Asiyah, and there's only a There's only a Hitzonius there. So now I don't know. I'm just trying to understand it. Okay, Ayidei Malvishim as the Malchus the Yitzira. So as a result of covering over the Malchus of Yitzira, therefore they become like Yitzira themselves. V'lechein tzarech lomer tikun shem ben mab. So therefore you have to do something. V'lechein kadei sheyukloch hitzonius hachabad the penimius hachagat al balvish as a Malchus the Yitzira. So he says the energy that takes for the Chabad of Asiya, to cover over the Malchus of Yetzirah, and also the Chagat, the Panemius of the Chagat, the Asiya, to cover over the Hitzonius of the Chabad, the Asiya. You have to have energy for that. Yesh lomar ata esa tefillah sheba ramos shem mab. So you need something to pull all of this up. That particular phrase is used to be able to, that's the idea, to move all of these elements up and to make room in the Sia for the Kedusha to come up from Bia. So he says, Shem Mab Ramos B'Tefilas Ana Bakoazh, Yesh Mab Tebos, which has 42 letters. V'hema Mab Roshi Tebos Shal Elu Tebos. So these are actually the 42 first letters, Shal Elu Tebos. It comes out Shem Mab Osios. So that is what the Ana Bakoazh is all about, all of those first letters. V'hu ba'olam ha'yitzira, v'sham Shem Mab. Now this Mab here we're talking about, I guess he's saying it reaches down in a certain sense. This name Mab, Haramah b'tefilas Ana Bakoazh, is really in Olam Yetzira, Hu ba'olam Yetzira. So what you're doing is you're pulling this element, tying all of these elements onto the Hitzonius. Now let me get this straight. I get so confused. They're on the Hitzonius of the Malchus of the Yetzira, making them into Yetzira themselves. Vayedei Amiras Tefilas Ana Bakoazh, Ana Ma'alam the Malchus the Yetzira as Olam Asiyah Shehem Chitzonis Achabad Upinibis Achaga. Now the whole purpose of this, as I read again, the whole purpose of this is to make a room in the Siyah for the Nitzutzos. Okay, another break, and we're going to go back as soon as Rebbe gets, so we'll wait here for that phone to come back on. Oh, gosh. I had a hard time getting the phone back on. Okay, where were we there? So let's go back to number Shin Nun Gimel. Now you could see, I can see, barely see, understand that this is how you're making room by pulling these certain elements, which is the Panemius of the Hagat of Asiya and the Kitzonius of the Chabad of Asiya, and pulling them and attaching them to Yetzirah. So that's the whole idea here. This is what complicated. Makes it possible for the Nitzutzim to come up. So he said, V'al Yedei Amiras Tfilas Ana Bakoazh, Ana Ma'alam the Malchus the Yetzirah as Olam Asiyah. Now we're doing this. Which parts of Olam Asiyah? He says, well, the only parts of Olam Asiyah we're talking about are the Kitzonius of the Chabad, Upanemius Hagat. They're going to wind up being part of Olam Yetzirah. So he said, "Va'afal pi shekol zecha behu ba'olam asiyah." So even all this is happening in olam asiyah. Va'afal pi shegam ata hey nish'arei ba'olam asiyah. Because why? Because the malchus of olam yitzira is in asiyah itself. V'heim eina olam el yitzira. They don't go up into yitzira. They call makom tzrichem lomar shem mab. So in any case, you have to say this the 42-letter name. The Yetzirah, the Halosim, El Malchus, the Yetzirah, in order to bring them on to the Malchus of Asiyah, Chomedet Ba'olam Asiyah. Now, even though he says they're all still in Asiyah, but the energy that takes for them to come and cover over the Malchus of the Chitzonius of the Malchus of Yetzirah takes Ana Bakoazh. Asher Sham Yardach B'Malchus the Yetzirah K'Netzka Da'el, we say that it went down there. Shaharech B'Malchus the Yetzirah Yardach B'Makom Asiyah. V'Sham Na'asim say the Hislav Shosana. Now I'm just wondering if, just because it's so difficult for me to understand this tremendous complication. Okay, I think I forgot my thought, so maybe it'll come back to me. Sham Na'asim say the Hislav Shosana. So this whole energy is just to put things, just to make the Hislav Shos work. And everything still is in the Asiya. Okay, what I was going to say is that, we know that in nighttime, say, for example, Malchus goes down into Olam Abiyah. So here we have another case of the Malchus of Yetzirah going down to Olam Abiyah. So, going down into Biyah. So, to Asiya at least. And it's something similar, that's all. So this is the reason why this particularly has to go after Pita Megataris, where you say Ana Bakoazh. Umapas tam zeh tiknu lomer achar miras akataris. As the fetus Ana Bakoazh. So this is where we say that Ana Bakoazh. V'hu kadei la'alos b'chasiya es achitzonis the chaba the penimis achagat the halal al achitzonis the penimius the malchus the yitzira. Let me go over that again. V'hu kadei. In order to what? What are we doing? Why do we need to say this Ana Bakoazh? La'alos b'chasiya to bring up into Asiya. As Hitzonius in Olam Asiya itself, as Hitzonius the Chabad, the Penimius, the Hagat, the Halbisham, Al Hitzonius, the Penimius, Malchus, the Yitzira, to bring them up on top of the Hitzonius and the Penimius of the Malchus, the Yitzira, Medis Ata, Ba'olam Asiya, which is all at this time in Olam Asiya. He says, Shuhu Shem Mab, what is it? It's the name of 42. So the Filas Ana Bakoach Yesh Bo Shem Mab. This is the Shem Mab that refers to Olam Yitzira and the energy that's required to pull a Siyah, elements of the Siyah, and attach them to the Malchus of the he says the Chitzonius of the Malchus of Yitzira. Shem Mab Hu Ba'olam Yitzira. It really is always an Olam Yitzira, so it's like a pull. It's like a pull string. So as you say, these 42 letters, Shehem Mab, which are 42, it has therefore this transition, which is, I'm reading what he said. He says it has the ability to change a Asiya into Lachzor, to return the Bechinas Yitzira. It's interesting he says Lachzor, as if it once was, because it once was part of Yitzira, but it developed further out into more physicality. As yesh yecholas b'chitzonius achabad the penimius achagat. So now there is the ability, because of the ma of the Yitzonius of the Chabad and the penimius of the Hagat, leheasos b'chinas Yitzira, to make themselves or to become b'chinas of Yitzira. Okay, I still think that Rebbe's coming back. Let's see, we're really close at the end of the time here. But I really do think he's still coming back. Here he comes. Okay, so let's finish up. Let's just do number Shin Samach again, just for review. Yesh Yecholas, because of the saying of these 42 letters. Lachso the Bechinas Yitzira, it makes it possible for return to a Sira. And that's why I said, why does he say Lachsor? Because Lachsor means you're going back to someplace you were at before. That's what it sounds like to me. So therefore it's a development now. The Siyah is development out of Yitzira. So now this element of a Siyah is going to go back to Yitzira. Oz yesh yecholes v'chitzonis achabad u'benimis achagad the also bechinas Yitzira. So now you have the ability for them to become this aspect of Yitzira. So he for the halvish keniskar, and then cover them over, like we said before, those two elements, he says that for practical purposes, well, this is the part that seems like a little steerer, where he says it still remains in a Siyah, but now he says na'asim ata yitzira, they are now really a Yitzira. The Mela chem yechola nahalvish al malchus the Yitzira, and because of this, they're able to cover over the malchus of Yitzira. There's a lot of fancy words over here, a lot complicated. That's a shir today.